Hey class, we are back with another lesson. This time we are learning about the Red Scare. Some of you may think, hey, we already learned about this. You're right, you did learn about a Red Scare. That was the 1920s, that was after World War I. We're going to talk about the Red Scare part 2. So Red Scare number 2, this is after World War II. So let's get into it. So, the Red Scare, everyone associates it with Joseph McCarthy. It is because he is considered the founder of the Red Scare. He was a United States Senator from Wisconsin. He was born November 14th, 1908. He died 1957, so he died really young. He was the biggest influencer of the Red Scare. Reason why he would call out members, both in different parties, both political parties, Hollywood, and just say, you're a communist. No facts to back it up, but the American public ate it away. It caused many investigations. He actually created his own noun called Mccarthyism. It is a campaign that blacklisted people for being red, aka communist. It started out mostly with it being spies that were actually proven in Hollywood and continued all the way through to both the Democratic and Republican parties and said that they were spies for the Communist Red Party. Early life of Senator McCarthy. He actually dropped out of high school at the age of 14. So, at first he was not well learned. He did this in order to help with the farm. His farm was getting ready to be lost, his family farm. He later attended high school where he graduated in only 1 year. So he actually was intelligent. He just needed to help with the farm in order to make him keep it. After that, he attended Marquette University, and he was admitted into the bar program. For any of you who know what the bar is, that means that he is a lawyer. So 5 years after graduating, he became a lawyer, which is very quick. Nowadays, it takes about 8 years to become a lawyer. So he did it within 5. Within this, 1935, he was now a lawyer. 1936, he tried running for office. He ran as a Democrat. Very important, because if you noticed before, he was a Republican. That becomes later on. But he ran as a Democrat for district attorney and lost. Pretty heavily, actually. It is because he had nothing to back him to say and to state what he was for and what he was about. He had nothing. He was a recent graduate, and that was it. 1942, he actually joined the U.S. Marine Corps. He was exempt from doing so. He did not have to join the war because he was a lawyer. However, he decided to join the war and was given the rank of first lieutenant right off the bat. He ended up flying through the ranks and reached lieutenant colonel. So he reached pretty high in the U.S. military. However, one thing he did, which we learned later on, he lied about his service. He falsely claimed to do and have done missions within World War II to be awarded the Flying Cross, which is one of the most prestigious medals that you can earn. He lied about 32 different missions in order to do so. So we're starting to see a lot about his character very early on. He will lie to get his way. This will come up again and again throughout his life. So, McCarthy in politics. So after World War II, he decides to run for U.S. Senate. So before, he only ran for district attorney. That's a very low honor as far as politics. U.S. Senator is huge. There are only 100 of them. He runs as a Republican. And in fact, he is elected. He is elected by almost a landslide. He had 67% of the vote. That is crazy to get that much percentage of the vote. It doesn't happen that often, unless you were in a really red or a really blue state. And at the time, this was not a really red state. Red meaning, in this case, Republican, blue meaning Democrat. This was not a really red state. People were just in favor of him because he was considered a war hero. However, once again, we later learn in history that he lied about many of the missions that he did. He was a popular speaker. This also helped him get elected. He was very, very good at debates, and he was a very good orator. However, during his first few years as a U.S. Senator, nothing is noteworthy. If you look throughout his first couple of years, he's in on a couple of bills, but he is a junior signer, meaning he has almost nothing to do with it. They just needed him for support. This would change during his re-election year. In 1950, Senator McCarthy started and spoke about enemies from within speech. This was a speech that talked about red communists within political parties. So, with these were Democrats and Republicans that were within the political party. And he said they were going to bring us down. They were going to hand us over to that of the Soviet Union. So just like before, communist is bad. It is associated with the Soviets. So he gained huge notoriety. People recognized him from this speech and began to gain fame. He was reelected by another landslide. And this started the second Red Scare in the United States. So, within politics, numbers grew of those that were considered red. There was an American Communist Party within the United States. They are now completely blacklisted. And it does not just go through them. It is also Hollywood that is attacked very heavily. Like I said, Democrats and Republicans are attacked as well. They went back to the old rhetoric. You are a red, meaning you are a communist. He used his own attack to attack people that he did not agree with. So say he did not agree with you based upon your beliefs. He would then call you communist, and you had to fight for your life to prove that you were not communist. Instead of being innocent until proven guilty, you were guilty until proven innocent. Very different than how politics and everything is seen today. Blackmail was very huge during this time. In order to stay off of these blacklists and in order to not be called red, you'd be blackmailed into giving money or into helping pass a bill. If not, they would look at you and say, you are red. We are now coming after you. If you are considered red and you are voted to be a red person, you are now going to be completely blacklisted, and if you are not a U.S. citizen, you're going to be deported. If you are a U.S. citizen, you're not going to have any rights at this point. They will take away all of your rights. You will not be able to maintain a job. It will be very hard for you to vote, and you will be attacked, both personally and professionally. False claims were made during this time. About 95% of those who were accused to be red or sympathizers of the red cause were considered false. It was only the beginning list, the Lee list by Robert Lee, who actually had the correct sympathizers and traitors on them. With McCarthy, it was a fake list that he had and only he had and had access to, where he would just add people whenever he felt that people were not paying attention to him. Once again, it forced people to prove that they were innocent. It was not guilty. It was not innocent until proven guilty. It was guilty until proven innocent. The complete opposite of what our nation is founded upon. No proof was offered during this time. If he did not like you, or if someone in the party did not like you, you were going to be ousted. You were going to be blacklisted. This caused chaos throughout the early 1950s. It seemed as if there was going to be no end, but in fact there was an end in sight. End of Mccarthyism, 1954 to 1955. Senator McCarthy is now blacklisted, is now ousted as saying false. He accused the United States military, especially the Army, of being red, meaning being communist. It was one of the first televised occasions of McCarthy. He had such backing at this time, but once he accused his own military of being red, the American public no longer agreed with him. They saw him as a very weird and outlandish person, meaning we cannot trust him, we need the proof. Senator McCarthy was not able to show any proof at any time. Instead, he lost a lot of his backing during the Red Scare. And right after this, a couple years later, he would actually die of what many consider alcoholism that he attributed to the end of his era. Because he was no longer seen as a great leader, but in fact was seen as a fictitious person. Just like a few years after that, after he died, we learned about his military record and how he lied in order to get the Flying Cross. What you need to know about McCarthyism is if you stood in his way during this heightened time of chaos, you were going down. He would lie, cheat, and steal in order to get anything that he desired. It did not matter who you were. He would do anything to get his way. Next, we are going to watch a short video about the Red Scare, and then we're going to get into a group activity about the Red Scare and about Senator McCarthy.
Throughout the Cold War, many Americans harbored an intense fear and hatred of communism. Why were they so afraid? Where did this hatred come from? In February of 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy produced a list of 205 names. He claimed that all of these names were people who worked within the State Department and were also communist. Following this revelation, Senator McCarthy began a series of congressional investigations in which countless accusations were made towards many individuals. Senator McCarthy's investigations, as well as those by the House Un-American Activities Committee, helped create the atmosphere of fear and resentment towards communists that would dominate the next 2 decades. Because of Senator McCarthy's efforts, the phrase Mccarthyism was used to describe the act of accusing someone with little or no evidence. In the early 1950s, there were also several pieces of legislation passed that increased the paranoia against communism. The best example was the Internal Security Act of 1950. This law required communist organizations to register with the Attorney General's office. Members of these organizations were not allowed to become citizens of the United States, and if they already were citizens, they could possibly lose their citizenship. There was also a Federal Employees Loyalty Program. This was a review board that determined the Americanism of federal employees. The board recommended that any employees suspected of being un-American should have their employment terminated. Across the nation, many states, communities, and even private businesses also established loyalty review boards. It is estimated that by the end of the 1950s, about 20% of all employees had to pass some sort of loyalty review. If an employee was discharged because they were deemed to be disloyal to the nation, their life could potentially be ruined. No other employer would be willing to hire someone with this type of speculation in their background. Some industries even developed blacklists to prevent disloyal citizens from being hired. Blacklisting is a term used to describe the informal exclusion of a certain group from employment. Blacklisting was especially prominent in high-profile fields such as the entertainment industry and government employment. Throughout this time period, thanks to the anti-communist hysteria, thousands of honest and loyal Americans were accused of being communists or communist sympathizers.
So as you can see from this video and what we talked about, it did not matter who you were, what connections you had. If you rubbed someone the wrong way, you were going to be accused of being red. After that, after being accused, your life would be over. Even if you were proven innocent, no one would want to take you on for a job. This would continue through the late 50s. So if you were accused in the late 40s, early 50s, you had to wait 8 to 10 years in order for your life to go back to normal. Most of these people who were accused, even though they were dismissed, their lives were ruined forever. Almost none were considered communists or communist sympathizers. But it's important to note, if you were accused, your life was pretty much over. So now we're going to do a group activity. Work in groups of 3 or 4 people. You guys can decide who you want to work with. Within your group, discuss this question. If you were in America during the 1950s, would you have supported Senator McCarthy? Remember, this is before Senator McCarthy was seen as false. If you were in the early 1950s during this mass hysteria, would you have supported him like most Americans did during this time? Or if you would not, would you have stood against his reign? Would you have said, I do not support this, there's no way that there is this many communists? If you did, remember, if you stood against him, you'd be accused of being red yourself, being communist. We're going to write down a few sentences and then each group will present their findings. Until this is done, and then we will talk about it. Thank you guys, and please work within your groups.